We will look back on Pokemon Day 2025's Pokemon Presents not only as one of the best Pokemon company has ever done, but also as the catalyst for a watershed moment in Pokemon games as a whole. And it will grow the franchise into something much bigger than ever before. That's the silver lining at least. However, this unprecedented moment will inevitably leave a lot of people behind. I'd say that's still for the better, and here's why. If you know me and the history of this channel, you should be subscribed and click the like button, and there's a very good chance that you are familiar with my take that Pokemon games have been in desperate need of a real overhaul for a very long time. And I don't mean the graphics or performance, because in 2025, I can't even begin to care about how many frames a menu simulator is running at. I have always asserted that Pokemon games can only reach their true potential with the masses, with games that are engaging to play. And to be quite honest, I am shocked to see Pokémon Legends Z-A play a pivotal role in this, as someone that was initially against this release for reasons you can hear in my 2024 Pokemon Presents video I'll link in the card above. But before I can even really deep dive into Legends Z-A, I need to talk about Pokemon Champions, because it'll play an even bigger role in enabling the change I and many other people want to see in Pokemon games moving forward. Pokemon Company describes Pokemon Champions as, and I quote, a battle-focused game that will feature familiar mechanics such as Pokemon types, abilities, and moves, creating an environment conducive to rich and varied strategies for new and experienced trainers alike. This is just their way of saying Champions is a battle simulator that will be accessible to fans regardless of where they are as Pokemon fans, be they hardcore VGC fans or casual Pokemon fans just wanting something to do on their phone in their idle time. They also add, it's not just familiar mechanics. You'll be able to bring in classic Pokemon from Pokemon Home too. Look forward to cross-platform battles alongside your favorite Pokemon on Nintendo Switch and mobile, with a variety of different modes available for your desired experience. This is Pokemon Company's official Pokemon Showdown client, and that is something I've suggested they do for years now, down to the home integration. And that's because while the masses see the core gameplay of Pokemon RPGs to be tolerable at best, there is something sacred about preserving it for the sake of posterity and to hedge their bets for VGC, because who knows, maybe Pokemon is better served as a turn-based RPG for competitive. I doubt it, but that's a multi-billion-dollar bet that Pokemon Company doesn't even need to take. They can test this theory risk-free, give people a place to be able to easily battle with others using any Pokemon they own. The decks will be limited at first, but that will change with time, from any Pokemon game from their Switch or mobile device, in a consistent high-quality art style. Make it tournament organizer and spectator friendly, add all of the staple modes like double, single, and multi-battles, throw in some of the more wacky legacy modes like rotation, inverse, or even sky battles. They could invent some entirely new battle types if they wanted. Special themed events with limited battle types. Make it as comprehensive of a celebration for the traditional Pokemon battling experience as possible. Because at the end of the day, while VGC is dated, I do think its legacy matters. Its legacy matters so much that I think a lot of fans hold it a bit too dear. A very common sentiment I see with hardcore Pokemon fans online is that VGC is this non-negotiable constant in the ecosystem of Pokemon, and that has become even more true in the modern era as VGC events have grown at a constant rate, with regional events consistently breaking attendance records.
VGC has grown so much, and like just the last year, even like it's funny, there's literally a meme about it that when Wolfglick won Orlando 2023, it was, or Charlotte 2023, it was the biggest tournament that had ever been done. Then he won Orlando 2024, and it was the biggest tournament ever. And then he won Charlotte. That was the biggest tournament ever. That was the biggest tournament. Then he won EUIC. It's the biggest one ever.
Right.
And so this is growing and growing and growing. So I do kind of wonder, they're seeing this tremendous exponential growth, and they go, let's completely get rid of it and do a completely new
I don't think they get rid of it.
That would be so game break.
I think them doing Champions is the opposite of them getting rid of it.
Sure, I don't. They're just adding another thing.
Yeah, I don't think they get rid of it.
letting it and having like a new battle system be part of
Yes.
it, but I think they would never fully get rid of VGC or have VGC be like the king moneymaker.
What isn't mentioned here is the greater context that is these record-breaking numbers people boast as unimpeachable insurance for the current Pokemon battle system are only really impressive if the only major esport you know is Pokemon. Everybody in the community has already said it. These events used to struggle to get a few hundred entrants, so the fact that a regional has net over 1,200 entrants sounds incredible. That said, it's important to note that the games are selling more than they ever have in the franchise's life as an esport. Not because of VGC, but the opposite. VGC isn't getting bigger because the battle system is particularly interesting or fun to engage with. The scene is growing because the games are bigger. It happens in any scene, but VGC fans don't see it because this group is particularly notorious for not engaging with any other game. If they did, they'd know that any game with any competitive aspects in them will garner a scene. With a franchise as massive as Pokemon, half the battle is already won. The other half is how fun the game is to play and watch. VGC is an easy L on that front. Super Smash Bros. Melee is 24 years old, and that game is liable to pull similar numbers to the record-breaking Pokemon numbers, and that game doesn't even have any dev support, let alone on the level of major dev support that Pokemon games have. There are no in-game ads for competitive events, there are no social media campaigns promoting events online or otherwise. VGC has the biggest media brand in history backing it in all of these ways and more, and it's still doesn't compare in popularity as an esport for players or viewers. That's not to say competitive isn't an important marketing opportunity though. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. I assert that having a successful, engaging esport is a huge marketing opportunity, and VGC as it stands is a hindrance to the true potential Pokemon could have as one. As I already mentioned, a competitive scene will form around whatever new system Pokemon Company gives us. This isn't speculation, it's fact. Pokken had a scene, Pokemon Unite has a scene, Pokemon Go has a competitive scene, and pairing the mainline games with a more modern battle system would receive the exact same treatment, and that would bring with it an even bigger scene than all of these, maybe even combined. It's not a coincidence that VGC has been so small for so long. People aren't connecting with Pokemon as an esport like they should. This is a franchise that sold nearly 30 million copies 2 times over in the last 7 years. Something like that should easily be clearing well over 1,200 entrants almost anywhere in the world. Again, look at the biggest Smash tournaments, many of which have more than doubled the heights of Pokemon even several years into their lifespan, let alone the 2 years since Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have been released. 26 million people bought Scarlet and Violet, and the current peak is 1,400 entrants 2 years into their life. That's not a stat to brag about. They should be ashamed, especially when their fellow Nintendo mainstay is embarrassing them with their assistance. Let's talk numbers. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate garnered 3,534 entrants at EVO 2019, 9 months into its life, with less than 16 million copies at that time. If we look at recent numbers without the EVO push or fresh game smell, Supernova 2024 in August of last year had 2,281 entrants. Kagoribi 13, slated for May of this year, is looking like a strong contender to put even those numbers to shame. Melee has had bigger events for literal decades. Even Smash for Wii U has had several bigger events. Pokemon should not only be comparable in this realm, it should be doing better given the aforementioned advantages that scene has. And I could list off other esports that dwarf VGC, but I mentioned Smash because it's something I'm similarly passionate about, and more importantly than that, it's a scene that Pokemon can learn from. All of that try-hard competitive mumbo-jumbo aside, it's not the only reason for real change. Long-running, major franchises are supposed to evolve. A franchise that began its life as an 8-bit game on a 144p screen shouldn't have the same gameplay as a full HD game on modern hardware. The tentpole Super Mario releases don't play the same as the original NES game did. Zelda is an even better example that I use frequently. Even Kirby, a game people also insisted could never change for similarly narrow-minded views of that franchise from diehard fans. Pokemon Company has said as much themselves. They maintained their momentum for nearly 30 years, but they could easily fall off if they don't keep the IP fresh for the next 30. Also, it's important to underscore the fact that no change they make needs to be permanent if it isn't broadly received well. Even when they do find a formula that will inevitably stick, fans of the traditional style have nearly 30 years of games to play. It's high past time to give people that want to see growth in Pokemon games what they want now. And if we use those aforementioned franchises as well as many of their ilk, changes within them weren't all embraced either.
I bought Tears of the Kingdom, and that's exactly what happened. I played to the first dungeon of Tears of the Kingdom, and then I stopped playing because I wanted to have a Zelda experience, and I'm like, maybe it'll be better than Breath of the Wild. But it was kind of like exactly Breath of the Wild.
There are many Zelda fans that hate Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom for uprooting their precious formula. 3D Mario game sales didn't match, let alone exceed 2D Mario sales until the past 2 decades. And if the point's been too subtle, I've been talking about Smash so much for more than the reasons I blatantly listed. It also vividly illustrates a potential future for die-hard traditionalist Pokemon fans when changes to the franchise do begin to turn them off. Ultimate is by far and away the more popular game and thereby esport, but Melee still has a relatively large active community that keeps their ideal version alive. They may not be the belle at the ball, but hey, at least they still get to show up at the party. Most of the time. Sometimes Nintendo doesn't invite them or kicks them out, but what are you going to do? And even for more casual Pokemon fans that don't want to go the extra mile like Melee fans would, we've seen this happen time and again with other franchises as well. Fans get left behind. It is what it is.
I do think it's totally fair. Like, I feel like I'm like fighting my co-host, but like, I think it's fair to be like disappointed or whatever, or like fearful or whatever word you want to use at the thought of like the one thing that you enjoy the most being kind of like quote unquote corrupted.
Unfortunately for these fans, a bigger fish means getting a brand new, bigger tank. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Pokemon. They'll lose some fans, but gain the masses. Worthwhile trade if you ask me. However, to give some hope to even those fans, innovation doesn't preclude them from doing any nostalgia releases on the side. The new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series exists. We still get top-down Zelda games. We get 2D Kirby still. There's no reason Pokemon can't do the same with traditional Pokemon games once they actually have their bearings and the mainline games meet the standards the franchise truly deserves. I can't remember the last time a Pokemon game was released that truly deserved the title of Game of the Year. Making these changes could get us there. With all of that in mind, Pokemon Company can use this as easy justification to actually try some new things with the core games, and this is where Legends Z-A comes in for me. I'm sure I'll have lore specific thoughts at some point and thoughts on things like the structure of Lumiose or the time period of the game, but the most exciting part of this game for me and for the purposes of this video is the new battle system they showcased in the Legends Z-A gameplay trailer. For as long as I've been making videos on YouTube, I've been campaigning for an updated battle system for Pokemon, and while fans tended to misconstrue that with turning Pokemon into a fighting game, I'm happy that Legends Z-A is maintaining the RPG roots. I think Pokemon at its core makes sense with RPG mechanics at its foundation. The problem has never been that it's an RPG. What was missing was some form of timing and positioning. So when Pokemon Company mentioned those elements of combat as benefits for this new system,
moves can have a longer or shorter reach, or different areas of effect. So choose your timing and positioning carefully to gain the upper hand.
I was immediately on board. For context, if it wasn't clear, despite Pokemon being my favorite media franchise, I play way more games than Pokemon and have been suggesting things Pokemon Company could learn from them for years now. This is a big reason for my newfound Legends Z-A hype. They seem to be doing exactly that, or continuing to do that, because I maintain the position that they've been doing more and more of this as the Switch era of Pokemon marched on. These changes have me unabashedly excited to play a Pokemon game for more reasons than the more abstract love of the expansion of the franchise's universe. I am excited to have fun playing a Pokemon game for the first time ever. And as a competitive player that plays more than one game, or even one type of game, Legends Z-A presents an exciting opportunity to discover how all of this works. I love the process of getting good at new games, and that process is at its best when it's attached to characters, and in this case, an entire world I care about. To use Smash as an example again, I've always loved that franchise, but I only fell in deep once a character I love superficially became viable. So if the execution of this Z-A battle system is even serviceable, I will be dumping so much time and energy into becoming good at it, and hopefully playing against and/or with friends. I love the idea of attacks having more complex use cases, like Stealth Rock seemingly being a potential defensive option, in the same way moves have more quirky uses in the anime.
Fletchling Razor Wind!
Use Crunch!
He bit the
No. Demon.
I like the concept of being able to physically bait out Protect rather than it being a relatively low level mind game. I like the idea of Pokemon mechanics like EVs and IVs being physically represented in game in more ways than who takes their turn when. I like the idea that it should now be possible to play through the game at a natural pace with your favorites as a challenge of skill and execution, and not just patience for grinding. I like the potential for variety that's not limited to slow playing or not. And I have so many questions. It's a real-time action RPG, but when you break things down, even fighting games have turns. What limitations are there on moves that influence who gets to take their turn when? For instance, in the trailer, you can see that moves have cooldowns, but what happens if you press another move? Could you extend your turn by pressing another move before your opponent can? Can hitting your opponent extend it further? We see Tepig continuing to run while it gets hit by Water Gun, and it's important to note that it's the only move we see connect that didn't end up KOing in the trailer. Is there some sort of hierarchy that determines whether a move affects a Pokemon's ability to continue moving through it? In other words, in fighting games, there are typically a few different states hitting your opponent can potentially put them in. Regular hit stun, when you connect with an attack and that attack causes an animation that locks your opponent out of attacking while generally leaving them vulnerable to attacks while they're standing. Soft knockdowns, where the opponent can attack, is still vulnerable, but typically with specific moves that reach low enough to hit them while they're on the ground. Or hard knockdowns, where the target of the attack hits the ground and is temporarily invulnerable to additional attacks. In the context of this trailer, it doesn't even look like moves have hit stun, or maybe the fact that Tepig didn't seem to get hit directly had some sort of effect on its ability to move, and potentially even the amount of damage it took. On a similar note, how does switching Pokemon factor into this? Could it be an offbeat defensive option akin to the way it works in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate? Or is it more similar to traditional Pokemon, where you need to take on some level of risk when switching between Pokemon mid-battle? If I had to guess, I'd assume the latter, if only for the fact that Pokemon seem to have entrance animations when cycled in. That said, maybe it can be a little column A, a little column B, where a well-timed switch could save you from individual attacks, or even just some of the damage from attacks, but the entrance animation for the incoming Pokemon could put them at risk, depending on their distance and the speed of the attack that is coming towards them. On the topic of distance, let's talk positioning for a bit. The way you control where your Pokemon goes has been on my mind since the full reveal, and in watching more closely for this video, it seems that Pokemon automatically favor standing a set distance from the trainer unless or until an attack is pressed, at which point I assume you can hold whichever attack command you choose to move the reticle on the ground to tell your Pokemon where to go to release said attack. I also gotta figure you can just tap the button to have the Pokemon attack from where they are standing at that time, but I will say there wasn't a time when an attack was pressed that we didn't then see the reticle move, so maybe it's a situation where the reticle will always move from the trainer to the Pokemon unless you choose a different destination. And what's up with Mega Evolution? How will it change to fit the battle system changes? One way we see that it definitely differs is it seems to be on a timer, so maybe it's kind of like using an ultimate move in a fighting game where you build up the meter somehow and once it's gone you revert to normal, or maybe the meter always starts full but there's potential to stall it out with movement. Also, what's up with the C plus next to the Mega Evolved Pokemon's moves? Is there some sort of affinity system that can increase the power, speed, or range of Mega Evolved moves? We only see C plus moves from all of the Megas in the trailer, so there is the possibility that it's just a way to visually indicate the difference between using a normal Pokemon move versus a Mega Evolved one. But I have to assume it's probably more than that, because if that's the case, why use a C plus instead of just using the Mega Evo logo? And if it is a grading system, how do we upgrade it? Is it friendship leveling, the amount of times a move is used? If we're to expect the game will inherit anything from the first Legends game, maybe the best bet is the latter, but I would be curious to see if this is potential for yet another curveball, and that system works completely different from what we expect. All of this excitement aside, I still do have some reservations. I still don't know that they're going to stick the landing with the execution of the battle system. I remember being excited at the prospect of strong and agile styles in Legends Arceus, and ultimately being disappointed with the end result. I remember being excited by the prospect of Arceus being an action RPG, but a lot of the segments that gave it that distinction, i.e. the boss battles, felt like a PS2 era action game with janky controls and hitboxes. But I will take that every day of the week over another 30 years of the same tired system. Of course, I expect them to land on something with potential and polish it at a better rate than the current system, but there's definitely a non-0% chance that may not happen. We'll have to wait and see though. That's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell while you're at it if you enjoyed it and are excited to see more Pokemon videos from me, because you can bet your bottom dollar more are coming soon. Thank you to executive producer Trev L. Steinberg and all of these other great names you see scrolling on the screen for helping making these videos possible. If you'd like to join them as well as learn about every other perk that's available, head to the link in the description to check out shop.watchredirect.com. Okay, that's it for me. See you in the next video.